There are two distinct thoughts that I would like to share to kind of set up a context to today's dialogue. They actually seem distinct, but in the case of our guest today, they kind of seamlessly come together at some point, I promise you. One is that we inherit a name in this world, we inherit a name from our family. But we don't necessarily, if we choose, inherit an identity because ideally that identity ought to be built as a distinct identity of our own by ourselves. I understand that not everybody has the privilege of doing that, but those of us who do, or those of us who are pig headed enough to pursue it, end up making and forming a identity of our own for ourselves. And the reason I mention this is because our guest today, in my limited understanding of what I've known her till now, has done that because although she was on a certain path, she was open to and she embraced wholeheartedly whatever signals the universe was giving her and whatever was probably deep inside of her since a very long time. And she was open to that and she acknowledged it and she accepted it. And therefore, from that understanding and acceptance, emerged a very distinct identity. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is her work, which centers mostly around children, that too, children that occupy a realm very different from our own. I think we are all extremely privileged. And because she works a lot in the social and developmental sector, uh, needless to mention that the children in that realm are not nearly as in as much of an advantageous position as we are. And therefore, I think it's safe to assume that pursuits such as investigating and forming one's own identity becomes way, way down a list of priorities. And the fact that she is now and for some time been working with them and ostensibly a lot of her work is in some form or fashion helping them shape their identities and realize their full potentials and their true purposes. That is how I see these two distinct thoughts really coming together in one very focused manner and clarity of purpose. We are calling today's session Deeply Social Conscience, and we are going to explore precisely that. We're going to explore mental health related work in the social sector, how it can be different, how perhaps it's a lot more demanding, a lot more intense, requires an altogether deeper kind of tenacity and commitment. And joining us to do that is Vidushi Jain. And Vidushi is somebody who's a graduate of an institute that I deeply admire and hold in great regard, TIS, amongst her other qualifications. And she's been working quite tirelessly from a very young age. We'll delve into that further as well, but mostly within and around children. And she's been doing some amazing work. And, you know, we all understand and appreciate that there is a dire need for that. So I want to thank Vidushi for making time to have this dialogue with us and for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Karthik. That means a lot. Like while you were sharing, I was just like there was this carousel of images that were going on in my head from all the days. So yeah, thank you so much.
Well, you're most welcome. And with that, and because I tend to completely botch up introductions of my guests, because I'm almost sort of I share my views on them rather than introduce them. Why don't we begin with you telling us more accurately an insight around your work? What are the kind of spaces you've been in, and what you've been doing?
Yeah. I think even if I try, I won't be able to share like how you are able to, speak of my work. But yes, so I presently work in a different kind of system. But I think over the years, one thing that has remained is my work with children. And yeah, so I think I can now say that I'm moving in between systems where I'm working with children directly. Then some part of my work is with people who affect children's well-being. So it could be parents, it could be teachers, schools. There are so many organizations that work with children. So with them, and of course, like because of that, then the larger systems. So yes,
Well,
that is.
thank God for that, because again, you'll have to tolerate my terrible sense of humor, because given the fact that a lot of us parents and teachers make a proper hash of it, thank God there are people such as yourself to course correct.
It's
Yeah.
it's less of a course correction. I think it's more of, like I have always believed that it takes, this saying that it takes a village to grow up a child. Um, I think it's so true. Like you cannot, nobody can do that alone, and they shouldn't. I mean, my role is again like very small, but just having that privilege of working with different people who are indirectly working with children gives me a lot of perspectives. So yes,
I'd
that's where
love
I'm
to,
working.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
I'd
no,
love to
no.
understand a little bit, Vidushi, in terms of the your initial draw towards the social sector, because we also understand that it requires a certain breed of person, or an individual with a certain kind of bent of mind and disposition to do that sort of work. And I'm not trying to, needlessly say that, you're some Mahatma or something, but there are, and particularly in today's world, despite the fact that the social sector by and large is a relatively more rewarding space in terms of a livelihood than it used to be. But we all understand the huge limitations and disparities that are still there. So, what are your sort of earliest memories of being drawn to that particular world, and what might have been some factors that compelled that to happen?
So I think I'll have to go way back. So just the family that I was, born in, is like we are a joint family, a big family for that matter. And my grandfather was working in like this women welfare department at his time. And after retirement, he opened this institution. It's called Chhatravas. So it's in Sanganer for children, again, who do not have finances. And I mean, he used to help them with education and everything. So, yeah, I was growing up in a place where we would talk about all of these things, talk about disparities, talk about just financial challenges. And he would always tell us, all of my brothers and sisters, he would just tell us this, that, lead your life in a way where you're proud of what you're doing and do not run after the money, do not run after comfort or luxury. Just do things right. So yeah, we were just like brought up in that kind of environment. So I think even while growing up, we didn't have a lot of money for that matter, or like we weren't really being brought up in a business family, but there was a lot of love. There was a lot of connection. There were a lot of games and fun and play. So I think just growing up in that environment made me feel that okay, this is how childhood should look like. And about social sector, again, like I had the same kind of understanding that most people have, which is that social work or social sector is largely about charity. So on your birthdays or on your anniversary, you basically collect like a bag of goodies or clothes and then you give it in an ashram. Or I mean, like once in a while you would give food to birds, and that's how you give back to the society. So that was my understanding also for the largest time, the longest time. And because of that, after my schooling I went into design because that was the wave at that time. And I was always fond of, I think, art and craft. But now that I look back, I was fond of art and craft because that was like a space where I could work with children. So that gave me like something to talk about or like to share with. Um, But yeah, very early on, I also lost my father. Like he passed away when I was in grade five. So during that time as well, I think this whole idea of life is very short, and you should just do as much as you can do things that you're passionate about. All of those thoughts kept creeping in again and again. Of course, it was a very traumatic time as well,
Mm.
but even with that, I feel just this idea of community and like family being together, helping each other, that kind of stayed. And yeah, like when I was in my college and when I was doing designing and I wasn't really satisfied there, I joined an NGO just because it was part of the curriculum. But I joined an NGO pretty late, and I mean, like, it wasn't really a design led thing. So I started working there, and I used to teach children there. And it was like in one of the underprivileged areas in Jaipur. So while I was teaching there, and there used to be like this bunch of kids who would come, and some of their mothers would also come, and the mothers would do stitching, and the children would sit and like they would study, complete their homework, learn things like that. So I would facilitate some very basic sessions, multiplication, division, what is your name, all of those things. And I think this is like one of the moments where my idea of, okay, social sector is this shifted, or mental health, because I would talk to this child every day, and he would come very regularly. And one day, like, he didn't come. Then 2 3 days passed, and I was just wondering what would have happened. But it was very common also in children there, because they would go sometimes to their villages, or
Yeah, yeah.
some wedding would happen. So I wasn't really thinking about something bad would have happened. I was just like, okay, he would come back. And then a few days later, he did come back with his mother, and then the mother dropped off the child, and I just asked very casually. And I wasn't really expecting something very big to happen. So I just asked what happened, why wasn't he coming? And she said, yeah, because like the other son that I had, he passed away in an accident on the road. And I took, I think, more than a couple of minutes to just process
Mm.
what did she say.
Yeah.
And I couldn't ask anything back. Like I couldn't ask how big was he, how old was he, when did the accident happen, anything, because I didn't know how to process that information. And while she's saying this, the child is like trying to go in the class. And then I asked him, "Are you okay?" And then he didn't say anything. He just shrugged it off, and then he moved inside. And the mother also said, "Okay, I'll have to leave. I have to go to my work." And she went, and I think while the class was going on the way it would, in my mind, I was constantly thinking of how is it that in a few days this child is, like because of the systematic things, because of like the mother had to go back to work, or the child had to be sent to the space so that he can learn. And it just felt very rushed to me. Like I felt like were they able to really
Yeah.
understand what had happened? So that day I didn't sit well. I think like that whole thing didn't sit well with me. So after the children left, I sat with the founder of this NGO, and I was just telling him that I don't really know how it works with children in this part of the society. While it happened to me, when something of this weight, like losing a loved one, happened to
Correct.
me, I got all the support and I got all the love. And, I was told it's okay if you don't want to give exams, it's okay if you don't want to go to school. And I did not really remember like what did I do in that moment, but I just knew that I could feel that support even now. He told me about this institute like TIS,
Mm.
and then he said, like there are degrees in it if you would want to pursue your education in it. And I came back home, I researched all about it, and that's when like this whole big shift happened. It was like, okay, social work is actually a degree, it's not just charity. And I wanted to drop everything then and there in that moment. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to study. This is what I want to understand. These kind of systems are where I want to work. And yeah, that it actually happened that way because I dropped out of my college the very next day. I told my family, okay, as much as I am fond of it, it's not the career I want to have. And they were supportive. They had their set of questions, but they understood, because I think it was very evident in my face, in my body language, that okay, enough is enough, and I want to work on these things now. So
Also, I
yeah,
think it might be fair to say that at the end of the day, you were coming from similar stock. So it wouldn't
yeah.
have been, that inconceivable. Although I must say, at the cost of generalizing, that it's very refreshing to see all of this happening in a Marwari family. And also, but on a more sincere note, I want to say that, sometimes there are certain things that get seeded in our childhoods. I would go so far as to say that, that lovely part that you referenced where your grandfather would, or your family, certain family members would routinely talk about not necessarily chasing money, but chasing a good life and a responsible life, etc. At that given point in time, to some of us can even sound like very, very off-putting lectures. And we say are pravachan dete hain wo to, and all of that. But I think those things get seeded and they almost become like little sleeper cells. And then there's a cataclysmic event that occurs. In your case, obviously it was the passing of this boy's brother, and then it sort of awakens you to that dormant seed that was always there.
I do think that's true because I think like while growing up also I was given like a very simple life. I mean it was, of course it was cushioned, but it was cushioned by love and not
Hmm.
by resources.
Got
Like
it.
it wasn't about having multiple toys, but it
Sure.
was about giving spaces to be able to talk. So I think I did value that, and that is again something that I'm trying to now create with my work. So yeah, I do think that you keep going back to your childhood, drawing from whatever you could learn there and apply it to your work in a lot of ways. So
Now,
that, yeah.
just the way we've sort of talked about the genesis of your love and abiding passion for the social sector, and I suppose it's really the flip side of the same coin, is also the fact that you have very consciously been working with children. I just want to quickly understand where that specifically comes from, and I'll tell you. I know I'm sort of generalizing this and stereotyping it to a large extent, but in a fair few cases, I've seen that if somebody has had a particularly bad, unfair, or tumultuous childhood themselves, then there is this need for sort of wanting to alleviate other children's plight and state. I just want to understand where your longing to work specifically with children comes from.
Hmm. So I think now I'm not able to really imagine a life where I won't work with children. I think that is like the definition of happiness for me. But I think even at a very young age, because we are a big family, and I was always like with my younger brothers and sisters, we were always talking about things. And from there, I could see that even like having one adult or even having one person who's able to be your safe space, that tremendously changes things. Like if you have a if you have even one person to come back home to after school and say, okay, this happened today, and
Hmm.
then I mean like share things, and that this person is going to be there, that changes so many things. So I think I could feel that while I was working with children, like I was teaching them. I would do art and craft sessions, things like that. But I could see that even having like this 1 hour, 1.5 hour time with them, where they could share anything, and how that transition, they would get so excited to come to these spaces, and they would like they would have like this memory log of what all I have to share, that the time would seem short, and they would just like keep talking about, okay, this happened and tomorrow this is happening and I am so excited. And even with my elder brothers and sisters and their kids, I could just feel that when I'm with children. And I think it comes from this idea of like I feel that that is where kind of like my creativity also comes out. It's not a very still space. Working with children is never still. Like you
Yeah,
can't
of
just
course.
ask them to sit on a seat and then you sit in a seat. It's not that kind of a space. I think it's so moving in a way, and I could really resonate with that. So I think yeah, like I can't really like pinpoint and go back when
No,
is
but
it that.
let me, at the cost of interrupting you, say that
Yeah,
you're actually preaching to the choir, because the only and singular reason why in my early 30s, despite being a Marwari as well, I left what was already a fairly well settled media career in Bombay and decided to become a teacher and remain very happily till today an untrained teacher, was because I suddenly uh, awakened that same dormant seed which was planted in my own case at boarding school, because I had a very, let's say, less than ideal relationship with my own father. And I realized how positively transformative a good invested mentor could be in a child's life, which is what I wanted to at least aspire to be to
yeah.
other children. So yeah, I mean, completely understand where you're coming from, and it's wonderful that because there's something to be said, particularly again in sectors such as the social sector, etc., where what is your motive for coming into that realm of work does make a significant difference, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Yeah. So now, speaking of that, and although again, I understand that work that we do or you do won't always necessarily feel like work because you love it so much, you're so passionate about it. Also, I think there is and in the best way possible, there is a certain excitement and an adrenaline when you're doing the work, but it is exceedingly draining work, and it sort of depletes one's vitality, etc. Give us a sense of what might be some of the things you do to sort of keep yourself regulated and energized.
Hmm. So I think, yeah, I mean, like you're right at this part that it doesn't feel like work when you're actually working with children, especially. But in a lot of ways, what drains me the most is just like this helplessness, I think. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
like there is not much that you can do. And especially when you're working in social sector, there are so many other things. There are like
Yeah.
these policies, funding, systems. There's just so many factors that are out of your hand, and that is, I think, what stresses me the most, or what, like
Yeah.
probably takes away a lot of energy from me. But again, like I think what I am able to do the most, which gives me, like which fills my cup, is the idea of, I mean, not wanting to be in situations where I'm just trying to fix things,
Hmm.
but also just to be an observer. So I ask a lot of questions. I would sit with my family and have like a lot of what if questions, like what if, today this happens, or what if we were living in a world where this was the case. And I think those discussions, those debates, with my partner, with these children, I think gives me like this sense of refreshment again, where I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, I
Sure.
mean, like we're still, there's still hope,
Hmm.
and there's still like a long way to go. Other than that, I think a routine really helps, because a lot of this work is very unpredictable. You could be working with a set of kids for years, and suddenly something so drastic happens that it's not in your control
Yep.
anymore.
Yep.
So I think just this routine, just this some sort of, mundane lifestyle in some ways, where you're getting up, where there's some sort of predictability around you, that really helps. And other than that, like I do have like some negative coping mechanisms also, and as a practitioner I feel really bad sharing this, but that is like what makes us human. So I think, I mean, just like splurging, indulging in shopping sometimes, that helps. But I think most of all, it's just to have these conversations. If I'm feeling heavy about something, if there's something which is really distressful, then I talk about it. um, as much as possible, I try to gain different perspectives, because that really helps me zoom out, and that in most situations is like what brings me out of them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, of course. And actually, I sometimes I feel that we don't place enough emphasis on, and therefore don't give enough credit to really, really dialogue that renews us.
Yeah.
It, it eludes most people. So yeah, I'm glad you have that and recognize it. Now, coming from the arts realm, and as somebody who's been learning Hindustani vocals since I was 6, and then having been to film school, etc., there was always this debate, this eternal debate, at least in the artistic space, of whether one really even needs to essentially go to school and get a film degree or get an arts degree or get learn painting. And then, of course, there's the slightly snobbish side to it, where I know a lot of very well-trained artists who sort of find it a bit infradic to interact with self-learned artists and all of that. Now, how does this debate play out in your perception vis-a-vis, something like mental health, and when you are coming at a space with so much practical, on ground, on field, lived experience, whatever name you want to give it? Do you feel? How do you feel is sort of importance of also quote unquote qualifying yourself? Where do you see this? Is there a divide? Are they complementary to you?
Hmm. So again, like there's so many things, but just in terms of like if I had to simplify it, how much of your education helps you with these lived realities, and do these lived realities and having an experience there, or like being exposed to all of these things, witnessing all of these things, is that enough to be practicing in the field? So I think it is definitely a balance. When I think when you're able to just witness a lot of things, that really opens up your mind to take and absorb a lot more. But I have been to some really good institutions, and I feel a big part of what I do, how I apply my skills, comes from the peers I had, their ideas, their way of thinking, the professors I had. And it really helped in my confidence, I think. Like I work in a field where, when you work with children, most people ask you these questions like, does it really require a degree? We're parenting and we didn't really take a degree. And we have been working with children. What is really working with children? You're mostly playing with them, or you're mostly talking to them. It doesn't really need a degree if you think about it. But in a lot of ways, there's so many things. Of course, these theoretical frameworks and everything only prepare you to an extent, and just going on in the field, just like working, takes the boat a little more. But I think it is a balance, and I do feel, just for the ethical sense of it, and just for making sure that we all work like professionals and there is like a bit seriousness to this profession, I do feel that education is important. I do feel that qualifications should be there, because if I think about it, it's almost like mental health, even though it's so vast of a topic, but it is in a way paramedical.
Hmm.
And there are so many things. Very quickly, things come up to diagnosis and assessment and treatments, and we wouldn't know where to and how to
Yeah.
work with them, or where to take these up.
Yeah.
So education kind of prepares us for that, even though
Hmm.
all of us in some way or the other now, with all the hyper awareness, also are mental health advocates at some level. All of us talk about self care, and like, taking a break, filling your cup, all of these things. But what education prepares you with and helps you, in fact, giving you that incubator to learn, to make mistakes, because when you're out on the field, making mistakes is going to cost you a lot. So as a student, however much you're able to learn is, or helps you in a long run. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I always sort of say that it provides you with a system. Now, that system can be approached to draw on it in order to make certain analysis, in order to stay on track, in order to just make sense of things that are happening and being observed, because they can't always necessarily be interpreted with as much value as is inherent in them, unless you know what you're looking for, which probably the education will give you. So it's always a good idea, ideally speaking, if one can do both. In the interest of time, I'm going to sort of collapse our last couple of questions into a more broad-based one.
Yeah.
Um, there is this idea that uh, it is entirely possible that the work, for example, somebody like you is doing with children at, the sort of NGO that you referenced, or one knows so many of these kinds of temporary, whether you want to call them daycare centers or creches that are set up for migrant laborers, children and families, etc. They wouldn't, the children and even ostensibly the parents would never know how to really define the work that you're doing, let alone being able to have any sort of concept or comprehension of, oh, acha, ye mental health space mein kaam ho raha hai. I want to sort of marry that thought with this whole thing of, obviously, if we look at the world in a sort of hierarchy and Maslow's sort of pyramid, there are baser concerns, or starting with roti kapda makan. How do you rationalize to yourself the work that you're doing? Have there been situations, for instance, where you've been questioned, कि अरे आप कर क्या रहे हैं? This makes no sense, or what is the use of this? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of situations where I was, in a way, questioned because, especially like when people, when parents, when teachers, they see that, okay, these children are going for these kind of sessions every day and they don't see any tangible outcome very
Yeah,
quickly. A lot of people start questioning, and especially mental health. I mean, like the entire idea is that it's not going to be very physically visible in nature, and it has a long-term consequence, definitely. But like in terms of short-term consequences or short-term outcomes, I think it's not very easy to witness them or to see them, to observe
absolutely.
them. Um, and also at the same time, I think specifically when you work in social sector, when the outcomes are visible, they're not really very, how do I put it? They're not something that are very welcoming as well. Like, I used to work in a government school, and we would have these conversations about safety. And, sometimes it was a set of adolescent girls, it was like 25, 30 girls. And we would have these conversations about, okay, if a man comes up to you on the road and says anything or touches you, you have to raise your voice and you have to rebel. And there should, like, we shouldn't get married before 18 because that's a legal age. Like, we would have all of these conversations with a very rights based lens. And these girls, when they started going back to their homes, they started talking about all of these things with their mothers. They're like, no, in terms of even something as simple as menstrual hygiene, we wouldn't wear cloth. We would rather have like a sanitary pad. So get us that, it is our right. Or when their parents would say, okay, now you're in 10th, and like it's time for you to go back to your village and you can continue your education there,
Yeah.
but now we're not able to afford it. So they would be like, no, you have to. I mean, it's your responsibility in a way to help us complete our education. And then these parents would come and then they would be really angry. So either it would be that we can't really see a change, or the changes we see are not very good, because how dare you give our child a voice, and that voice
Absolutely.
is helping them stand against us only. Um, and I can understand from a parent's perspective, from a caregiver's perspective, that it is not very easy, or it's not very warm to see your own child standing up against you. But I think in a lot of ways, like this whole thing, when they would get out of that system and them having that courage to speak up, or them having kind of those words, those metaphors to explain what's happening. We would do these activities about identify animals in the wildlife and like see if this animal is dangerous or this animal is interesting. And then similarly think about people. So how would you put them? Like who would you put as interesting? Who would you put as slightly dangerous? Who would you put as unpredictable? And then they would go back home and tell these things that, these people I consider dangerous. So sometimes I think it takes a while to for for this work to show up, and it shows up in a lot of different ways. Specifically when a child is undergoing trauma, I think there's a lot of sensory work that we do, because like trauma in children and in adolescents is stored like in a very non-verbal way. So it's
Absolutely. I mean, the
not
body
something
stores
that,
it and it gets repressed,
yeah.
and it needs creative vents for it to sort of be expelled.
And sometimes when you're working with somebody who has undergone a trauma, people really expect quick outcomes. They really
Hmm.
want you to tell, okay, what happened? What did she share? What did he share?
Hmm.
Did he
Hmm.
tell you why is he not talking to us?
Hmm.
Did he tell you why is he not eating? And me responding with, okay, it's going to take time.
Hmm.
We all have to co-regulate it. We have to be calm so that the child can feel calm and safe, and then it would come out. And sometimes it would take weeks, sometimes it would take months, sometimes through a very random drawing of theirs or through a very random statement or a song choice, they would speak up and they would share that, okay, this is what had happened, or this is what I don't know. But I think it does have an effect, but it takes time. And once that arc is complete, people do feel that change and then they're very grateful for it. So, yeah,
I mean,
that
you know,
has,
the reason I've been sporadically or intermittently laughing while you've been responding is only because, and I've been dying to tell you this, that I can't tell you how big time I identify with what you're saying, because essentially, in a lot of ways, um, you and I are working in concentric circles where we're doing similar work just to different audiences. So
yeah,
obviously, because your main target is at a certain stage in evolution and sociological evolution, you are obviously addressing them for fairly fundamental rights, etc. Now, with my students, mostly I'm sort of encouraging them to, sort of investigate and figure out what their true passions are, and then perhaps develop the courage to pursue those long term. So, similarly, when my kids go to their parents and say, I don't want to do the family business, I want to do photography, I'm told at least once a week, even today, that आप तो हमारे बच्चों को rebels बना रहे हैं. So I see exactly where you're coming from, but that is very important work. And of course, nobody is trying to make anybody a rebel without a cause.
yeah,
So, um, it is a opportune also time, therefore, for me to ask you that, given what we've just been discussing, what is one singular sort of message that you would want to give to parents or to guardians in general, with regards, just I don't, sometimes mental health, the term itself is a bit, I don't know, to me personally strange. Like, it's just nicer to say just social emotional learning and maturity.
yeah. So I think one thing that I would really wish parents, caregivers would take away in regards to their child's development, I think, is that most of the things, like I think when I look at children, and sometimes, like it takes a lot to work in areas where you don't really have the words to explain that, okay, this is not how it works.
Yeah.
And especially with children, because their moral development comes at a later stage, so they won't just agree to what you're saying because, okay, this is how I won't hurt my mother or father, or my teacher. So we have to really understand things developmentally. We
Mm.
have to really, really understand and go back to like the minimum concepts of biology, that most of the things that we see, the kind of behavior, outburst, misconduct that we see is at the essence, uh, it's just neurobiological. It's just our brain's way of reacting. And
So
For
just so
us,
that I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that it's very primal.
yeah,
Huh.
it's very primal, it's very human. And we have to really understand that it's not about fixing something as much as it's about us trying to understand where they're coming from.
Hmm.
Most times, I think what the parents today, when I look at it, are trying to do is they're creating safe spaces in terms of cameras, in terms of phones with
Hmm.
locks,
Hmm.
which is all important. I understand.
Hmm.
But what children need is not a safe space. They need a felt space.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's felt safety rather than physical safety. It's not building forts around them. It should be free. I mean, of course, I am not saying don't worry about, where they are and timings and everything. That is all there. But I think parents are able to understand that very well. This felt sense of safety is something that we have to really work upon. And at the same time, I think most children react to this again, felt sense of danger. When they think that, okay, this could probably be something which is not, which could be threatening for me, they react. And those reactions, we only see those reactions in a box where we're like, okay, how did he react like that? And why is she reacting like that? But yeah,
Because I
I
think,
mean,
again, we are even that interpretation that a lot of us parents do is only through the myopic lens of a physical nature of,
yeah.
oh, lagi to nahi, to aise kyun kar raha hai? So because most reactions are to a sort of emotional or nervous system related threat perception, isn't it?
And it comes out physically.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think when we have a physical outcome, we look for physical causes. But
Yes,
most times, physical outcomes are caused by something that's internally
most
happening
definitely.
and they don't have. Like for a very small child, when they cry, we know that, okay, the child could be hungry or in pain, but we don't give the same set of, like same kind of empathy to children when they're growing up,
Yeah.
especially in their teenage years. I've been hearing these sentences again and again around me that, okay, now they're entering their teenage years, God save me, and like, I don't know what I'll be doing.
Yeah, it's a bit sad. Hmm.
Yeah, but I feel like all of us have gone through that period and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy even with the best of situations around us. So we have to really stop criticizing our children in front of them, directly in front of people. um, I think that really shapes their
Yeah.
development, their understanding of themselves. We really have to start understanding that their communication, their language is play. So sometimes they won't be able to understand what somebody wants them to do because it is coming out in a way which is not their language. So play with them, spend time with them. I completely understand it's not easy, but I think we all need that village around us to help us with it. And yeah, I think most parents are trying to do a good job. Now we have a generation of parents which are consistently looking for answers, which is a good start, I feel.
It's definitely a good start because even if one doesn't have the answers for oneself, there was a lot of resistance in even seeking them or taking them or accepting them from other sources, which is definitely changing.
Yeah.
And so, and that is an extremely poignant and powerful thought on which to pause and sort of leave people pondering it. Geofence your vehicles, not your children. And we can parents will always, I think, continue making mistakes because it's human to err, but with a certain amount of awareness, which really isn't that difficult to gain, actually. It's fairly basic stuff, like just get a couple of the basics right. I think that'll hold everyone in much better stead. Thank you very much for the work that you do and the clarity of purpose that you have. It's hugely admirable. For a fogey like myself, when I see a relative youngster with this kind of focus, it really fills me with hope and optimism. So
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
And I always say this whenever there's a guest on from Jaipur itself, selfishly, I feel even more chuffed about that. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much and take care.
Thank you so much. Take care.